The heavy oak doors of the First Baptist Church of Savannah felt cold against my palm. I pushed them open just an inch. The smell hit me first. Floor wax, white lilies, the suffocating weight of 200 expensive perfumes. Inside the sanctuary, the pastor's voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. He was praying for a child that was not yet born. I looked down. My daughter Lucia was exactly 6 weeks old. She was asleep against my chest. Her tiny fingers curled tight around the strap of my white dress. I wore white because I wanted them to see me. Every single one of them. This was not my church. This was Donna Ballard's church. And right now, Donna sat in the front row. Her posture was perfect. Her signature pearl necklace rested against her collarbone. Her hands were folded over her Bible. Up at the altar stood her son, Troy. He wore the charcoal gray suit I had picked out for him 2 years ago. His hand rested on the small of Autumn's back. Autumn wore a flowing white maternity dress. Her belly was perfectly round at 6 months. Troy smiled his golden boy smile for the congregation. They were gathered here to bless his baby. The baby he claimed was his. The baby currently growing in his mistress's womb. I felt no triumph. My legs ached. My chest felt hollow. I was just so profoundly tired. Gina stood behind me. Her hand touched my shoulder. "Katie, you do not have to do this." I did not turn around. "Yes, I do. They will hate you. They already hate a version of me that does not exist," I whispered. 6 months, Gina. For 6 months they said my baby was not his. For 6 months they said I was a liar. I took a slow breath. I adjusted Lucia in my arms. 6 months ago I was still picking out nursery colors with the man standing at that altar. The paint was called Pale Buttercup. I remember the exact name because I had spent 3 hours staring at it on the walls of our spare bedroom. I was 29 years old. My name was Katie Soto. I was a labor and delivery nurse at Memorial Health, which meant I spent my days guiding women through the hardest moments of their life. But sitting on my living room sofa that Thursday night, 5 months pregnant, and wearing oversized sweatpants, I was just a girl waiting for her fiancé to call. I had bought a wooden letter L to hang on the nursery door. I was leaning toward the name Lucia, or maybe Luna. The ultrasound folder sat on the coffee table right in front of me. The doctor had confirmed it that afternoon. A girl. My phone buzzed. A FaceTime request from Troy. He was supposed to be on a 3-day business trip in Atlanta. I swiped to answer. I held up the ultrasound photo to the camera before his face even fully loaded on the screen. "It is a girl," I said. My voice cracked. I was smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. Troy appeared on the screen, but he was not looking at the camera. His eyes darted off to the side. The lighting in his room was dim. There was a television playing in the background. The audio sounded loud. It sounded close. Like a hotel bedroom, not a lobby. "Troy," I said. "Did you hear me?" He blinked. He looked back at the screen. He did not smile. "Yeah, that is great, Katie." My smile faded. I lowered the photograph. The sound from the television shifted. A commercial ended. And then, beneath the noise of the broadcast, I heard something else. Ice clinking in a glass. The rustle of heavy bedsheets. "Where are you?" I asked. "At the hotel, babe. Just chilling." I stared at his face. At the tension in his jaw. At the way his eyes kept flicking to his left. "Troy, who is in the room with you? 1 second, 2 seconds. 3 seconds passed. Katie, do not start." My breath caught. My chest tightened. What kind of voice is that? You have never said, "Do not start" to me. 4 seconds of silence. The thick, heavy silence of a man who knows he has been caught, but decides he does not care. "Katie," Troy said. His voice dropped. It became cold and slow. "How do I even know that is my child? Handle it yourself." I could not breathe. My lungs simply stopped working. I stared at the screen. But Troy had already hit a button. The camera went dark. Through the audio just before the call, disconnected entirely, a woman's voice drifted over the line. "Babe, are you coming back to bed? Click." The apartment was dead silent. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The smell of wet yellow paint drifted out from the hallway. I looked down at my hands. I was still holding the ultrasound picture. Down in the bottom right corner, printed in neat black ink under the heading for father, was the name Troy Ballard. He had signed the clinic form. He had held my hand when the doctor found the heartbeat. He had cried. I picked up my phone. My hands felt like ice. I opened Instagram. I went straight to Troy's profile. Just 3 weeks ago, he had posted a picture of our first sonogram. He had captioned it, "Cannot wait to meet you, little one," with a heart and the hashtag #DadLife. I scrolled down. The post was gone. He had deleted it. But I knew Troy. I knew he never emptied his deleted folders. I logged into my secondary account, the one I used to check up on clinic updates, and I navigated to the shared cloud drive we kept on our phones. I found the recently deleted album. The picture was sitting right there. It had 28 days left before it vanished forever. I took a screenshot. I saved it to my own private drive. My hands were trembling violently, but they were the hands of a nurse. They were hands that knew how to hold on when everything else was falling apart. By the next morning, I was blocked on every platform. My texts bounced back. My calls went straight to voicemail. Facebook, Instagram, everything. I ceased to exist in his digital world. I drove to the Savannah Ford dealership, where he worked as an assistant manager. The morning sun was already baking the asphalt. The showroom smelled like new tires and stale coffee. His boss, a man who had eaten dinner at my apartment 4 times, would not meet my eyes. He stared at his clipboard and mumbled that Troy had taken a leave of absence for personal reasons. I knew where he was. I drove to Donna Ballard's house. It was a massive brick colonial in a neighborhood where the lawns were cut with rulers. I walked up the pathway. The wind chimes tinkled on the porch. The smell of blooming roses was thick and heavy. I knocked on the heavy oak door. Donna opened it. She wore a crisp white blouse and a beige cardigan. Her gray hair was immaculate. She looked down. Her eyes rested directly on my 5-month pregnant belly. Her face did not soften. "Mrs. Ballard," I said. My voice shook. "Troy is not answering his phone. I need to know if he is here." Donna folded her hands in front of her. "Troy has told me everything. You should stop this right now, sweetheart. That belly is not my son's mistake." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stepped back. "I have the ultrasound pictures. He signed the papers. He was at the clinic. You can fake anything on a computer these days." "This is your son's child," I pleaded. I hated how desperate I sounded. I hated the hot tears burning in my eyes. Donna tilted her head. Her voice dropped into that sweet, deadly Southern register, the one she used at church when she was about to destroy someone's reputation. "Bless your heart. I will pray for you." She closed the door. The latch clicked. I stood on the porch. The roses smelled like rot. She had not yelled. If she had yelled, it would have meant she saw me as a threat. Calling me sweetheart and blessing my heart meant I was nothing to her. I was dirt. The next 2 weeks were a blur of silence. I called my family in Valdosta. My family was conservative, strictly Catholic. My mother, Rosa, was the strongest woman I knew. When she answered the phone, I told her Troy had left. I told her I was alone. She listened for 30 seconds. Then she spoke. "You made your choice to have a child without a husband. Live with that choice." She hung up. My father never even got on the line. I was entirely alone. My rent was due. When I checked our joint bank account, my stomach dropped. The balance was $64. Troy had transferred out over $6,000 the night before he blocked me. He had taken his half and my savings. I had to go back to work. I had no Troy to pay the bills. I had no mother to lean on. I had myself, my scrubs, and a 12-hour night shift at Memorial Health. It was the hardest shift of my life. Around 2 in the morning, I helped deliver a baby boy for a young couple. The father held his wife's hand. He sobbed openly when the baby let out his first cry. I cut the umbilical cord. My hands were steady. My face was a blank professional mask. I smiled. I congratulated them. I made sure the mother was stitched and comfortable. Then I walked into the staff restroom. I locked the door. I sat on the closed toilet lid and I wept. I cried until my ribs ached and my throat tasted like copper. 3 minutes. That was all the time I allowed myself. I stood up, turned on the cold water, and washed my face. When I walked back out to the nurse station, Gina was leaning against the counter. Gina Morrow was 42 years old. She was the charge nurse on my floor. She was a single mother of 2 teenagers. She had seen everything and she did not tolerate fools. Gina looked at my red eyes. She did not ask if I was okay. She knew better. "Troy?" she asked. I nodded. I sank into the chair beside her. I stared at a blank chart. Gina sighed. She set her pen down. "My ex-husband did the exact same thing 8 years ago. Denied my youngest. Walked out. Went around telling everyone I was crazy." I looked at her. Gina never talked about her personal life. "I kept my mouth shut," Gina continued. Her voice was flat, devoid of self-pity. "I thought if I stayed quiet, if I took the high road, people would eventually see the truth. I let him write my story. I lost half my friends. I almost lost custody because he claimed my silence meant I was unstable. When I finally started writing my own story again, I was 2 years too late. I do not want a war," I whispered. I stared at the faint water birth scar on my left wrist. I covered it with my right hand. "I just want them to tell the truth. I just want him to admit it." Gina leaned closer. The smell of hospital-grade sanitizer and cheap break-room coffee hung between us. "Truth and peace do not belong in the same room, Katie. You have to pick one." I looked away. I still thought I could have both. I still thought if I was just good enough, if I was just quiet enough, they would realize they were wrong. I did not want to blow up my life. I just wanted my family back. But as the shift ended and the morning sun crawled through the hospital windows, I knew Troy was not coming back. Donna was not going to call. My mother was not going to save me. The yellow paint was finally dry. I set my bag down on the kitchen counter. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim morning light. I placed my hands on the keyboard. I typed 7 words into the search bar. How to establish paternity in state of Georgia. 2 weeks after that hospital shift, I walked up the heavy stone steps of the Chatham County Family Court. I was 7 months pregnant. My lower back throbbed with every step. The May heat in Savannah was already turning the air into a thick soup. I carried a manila folder in my right hand. Inside the folder was a formal petition to establish paternity. The legal process was cold and bureaucratic. You fill out the specific forms, you pay the filing fee, you wait for the clerk behind the glass window to stamp the paper with a loud final thud. The court would then send a legal summons to Troy. He would have to comply with the order, or the judge would declare him the biological father by default. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped back out into the bright morning sun. A warm breeze blew off the river. It carried the sweet, heavy scent of magnolia blossoms from the park across the street. I stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. For the first time in 2 solid months, I was moving forward. I was taking an action instead of just bracing myself for the next hit. I was using the law to force the truth into the light. I felt a tiny flutter of hope, but I should have known better. I did not know Troy had quietly moved out of his apartment. I did not know he was currently sleeping in his old childhood bedroom. The court summons was not going to a place where Troy would open it privately. It was going straight to Donna Ballard. 1 week later, I was sitting in the Memorial Health break room. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. The small room smelled like cheap roasted coffee, and the lingering scent of someone's microwaved soup. Gina walked through the door. She did not grab a coffee mug. She walked straight over to my table, sat down, and slid her phone across the scratched surface. "You need to read this," she said. It was an email. It had been forwarded 3 times. The original sender was Donna Ballard. The recipient list was the First Baptist Women's Prayer Circle. 47 members. I scrolled down to the original message. "Dear Sisters in Christ, I come to you heavy-hearted. As many of you know, Troy has been going through a difficult season. A young woman from his past has come forward with claims that he fathered her child. I want you to know Troy has denied this, and we are standing by him in prayer. This young woman has a troubled history, and we ask that you lift Troy up during this time. We also ask that if she reaches out to any of you, please direct her to me. Let us surround Troy with love and truth." In his light, Donna. I stopped reading. My eyes locked onto 2 specific words. Troubled history. Donna did not accuse me of cheating. She did not say I was crazy. She did something much worse. She left a blank space, and she let 47 women fill it in with their own imaginations. Troubled could mean drugs. It could mean severe mental illness. It could mean I slept around. She kept the wording vague so it sounded like genuine Christian concern, and her strategy worked. 47 women. 47 women with husbands, children, and social media accounts were actively praying for Troy. They were judging me without ever hearing my voice. They were spreading a story where I was a villain and Troy was an innocent victim. My hands began to shake. I set the phone down on the table. I looked at my own palms. These hands checked fetal heart rates. These hands caught newborn babies when they entered the world. And to a church full of strangers, these hands belonged to a troubled woman trying to ruin a good family. A wave of nausea hit me hard. The microwave in the corner beeped loudly. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Gina," I said. My voice sounded thin and hollow. "Where did you get this email from, Marcy?" Gina replied. "We went to high school together. She is a member at First Baptist now. She forwarded it to me because she thought I might know who the troubled girl was." I stared at the glowing screen. "So everyone in that church knows." Gina nodded slowly. "And everyone in that church talks to." The pieces suddenly snapped together in my mind. Troy abandoning me was not just a panic response. This was a calculated campaign. Troy denied the baby, and Donna rewrote the history. They were working together to erase me completely and protect his pristine reputation. I pushed my chair back and stood up. The metal legs scraped harshly against the linoleum floor. "I need to record Donna." Gina looked up at me. She did not blink. "Georgia is a one-party consent state. You record your own conversation, and it is entirely legal." 3 days later, I drove to Donna Ballard's house for the second time. The June heat radiated off the hood of my car. I was 7.5 months pregnant now. My belly bumped against the steering wheel when I put the car in park. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the voice recording application. I hit the red button, slipped the phone deep into my jacket pocket, and walked up the paved driveway. I did not come to beg this time. I came to let Donna speak. I knocked on the heavy wooden door. A moment later, it swung open. Donna stood there in a crisp beige blouse. Her gray hair was perfectly styled. She looked at my stomach, and a tiny crease appeared between her eyebrows. "Mrs. Ballard," I said. My tone was polite and completely even. "I just want to know if Troy is here. The court sent a summons and nobody has answered it." Donna sighed. Her posture remained perfectly straight. "I told you before, sweetheart. My son is not the father of that baby." I kept my eyes locked on hers. "The DNA will tell. The court already ordered the test." The sweet Southern grandmother mask finally cracked. Donna stepped forward. The gap between us closed. Her voice lost its sing-song quality. It became low, sharp, and entirely cold. "Who do you think you are?" Donna asked. You think you can come here into my home and threaten my family with a court, I told Troy. Do not sign anything. Do not acknowledge anything. You want money, you will not get a single penny. I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch. I do not want your money. I want my daughter to know who her father is. Donna scoffed. The sound was dry and bitter. Your daughter should figure out who her mother is first. She stepped back and slammed the door. The brass knocker rattled loudly against the wood. I stood on the porch for 10 seconds. The wind chimes tinkled softly above my head. I walked back to my car, got inside, and locked the doors. I pulled the phone from my pocket and pressed stop. The digital file saved. 4 minutes and 22 seconds. Donna had just confessed. She admitted she told Troy to deny his own child. She instructed him not to sign the legal papers. She called my daughter that baby instead of her grandchild. I pressed the phone against my chest. The metal was warm against my skin. I finally had a weapon. It took 5 more weeks for the court process to play out. I was 8.5 months pregnant. My ankles were constantly swollen. The Georgia summer was brutally humid. The court-martial finally served Troy at the dealership. The judge gave him a strict deadline. He had 14 days to appear at the state-designated laboratory, or he would be legally declared the father by default. He showed up on day 12. I was already sitting in the sterile waiting room. The air conditioning was freezing. The walls were painted a lifeless gray. I heard the door chime ring. I looked up from my lap. Troy walked in. It was the first time I had seen his face in 4 long months. He looked exactly the same. Same khaki pants, same tucked polo shirt, same confident posture. But he was not alone. A woman walked in right behind him. I recognized her face immediately. Autumn Pace. She was his girlfriend from his college days at Georgia Southern. I had seen her face in old photographs he kept in a shoebox. She was wearing a tight floral maternity dress. Her belly was distinctly round. It looked to be about 5 months along. The math lined up perfectly with when he left me. Troy walked directly to the reception desk. He did not look in my direction. He signed the clinic clipboard. Autumn did not look away. She stared right at me. Her eyes were wide and dark. She wrapped both of her hands tightly around Troy's arm. She leaned her entire weight against him. She was marking her territory in a room full of plastic chairs and old magazines. They sat down on the opposite side of the waiting area. The silence in the room was suffocating. The receptionist typed loudly on a computer keyboard. A clock ticked relentlessly on the wall. Then Troy broke the quiet. "Katie," he said. His voice was heavy. He sounded like a tired parent dealing with an unruly child. "I hope when the results come out, you stop." I looked up. I set my purse on the floor next to my feet. Stop what? This show. This drama. I have moved on. Autumn is carrying my child. I looked at Autumn. She bit her lower lip and stared down at her sandals. I looked back at Troy, the man who had kissed my forehead every single night for 2 years. The DNA will tell, Troy. He let out a short, dismissive breath. The DNA will tell. And after that, you owe me a massive apology. The clinic nurse called his name. He stood up, squeezed Autumn's shoulder, and walked through the double doors. I closed my eyes. I focused on the sound of the air vent humming above me. 3 long weeks later, the results arrived in my mail. I took the thick envelope straight into the bathroom. I locked the door. I sat down heavily on the cold tile floor. I was over 9 months pregnant now. I could go into labor at any moment. My hands shook violently as I ripped the top of the envelope open. I pulled out the heavy white paper. My eyes scanned the dense medical text. 99.97%. Troy Ballard is the biological father. I dropped the paper. It fluttered down and landed near the bathtub drain. I leaned my head back against the porcelain tub and I began to cry. The tears came fast and hot. I did not cry because I was happy. I cried because I was exhausted. For 4 entire months, the man I loved had called me a liar. His mother had called me a liar. 47 women in a church prayer group had called me a troubled woman. They had built an entire alternative reality where I was the villain, and I was right. I was telling the truth the whole time. But as I sat there on the cold tiles, a dark realization settled over me. This was a false victory. The paper in front of me proved everything, but nobody knew about it except me, the laboratory, and the family court judge. Troy still controlled the public narrative. Donna still controlled the congregation. To the rest of Savannah, I was still the unstable ex-girlfriend trying to ruin a beautiful new family. The truth existed, but it only lived inside this tiny bathroom. A truth that nobody hears is just silence. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. The paper edge was getting wet from the steam of a leaky hot water faucet. I needed a plan. I needed to know how to use this paper to make them listen. My phone buzzed loudly on the bathroom counter. The sudden noise made me jump. I reached up and pulled it down. The screen glowed brightly in the dim room. It was a text message from a Savannah area code that I did not have, saved in my contacts. I opened the message. There were only 2 short sentences. Hey, this is Autumn. We need to talk. The afternoon sun baked the brick sidewalks of the Starland district. I walked into the Foxy Loxy Cafe, and the heavy scent of roasted espresso and warm pastries washed over me. An acoustic guitar played softly from the courtyard out back. I was exactly 9 months pregnant. My center of gravity was completely gone, and my lower back ached with a dull, constant rhythm. I found Autumn sitting at a small wooden table near the back window. She wore a flowing white maxi dress. Her belly formed a small, neat curve beneath the fabric. She was about 4 months along. I pulled out a chair and sat heavily across from her. 2 pregnant women in a sunny coffee shop. To anyone looking from the outside, we probably looked like old friends, sharing the best moments of our lives. Nobody knew the truth. I know you hate me, Autumn said first. Her hands were wrapped tightly around an iced glass. I did not come here to hate anyone, I replied. I came because you sent me a message. Autumn swallowed hard. I sent it because I also need a DNA test. I stared at her. I waited for her to explain. Autumn looked down at her hands. Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. I grew up in a trailer park out in Statesboro. My mother worked double shifts. My father was a ghost. I never had a real house or family dinners. When Troy came back into my life 4 months ago, he brought me to Donna. Donna hugged me. She called me her daughter. The whole church welcomed me. For the first time in my entire life, I had a family. She took a ragged breath. I was pregnant with his baby, but I lost it. I miscarried at 5 weeks. It was so early it just felt like a late period. I did not tell anyone. I was terrified. I was going to lose the only family I ever had. Autumn looked up at me. Her eyes were red and desperate. There was a manager at the restaurant where I work. He was just there when I was falling apart. It was not love. It was just a stupid, desperate mistake to make myself feel something else. I got pregnant immediately. The dates matched perfectly. My belly is growing right on schedule. Troy never knew. Donna never knew. Nobody suspects a thing. Autumn reached across the table, but now you have a court-ordered test. If Troy gets used to the idea of DNA tests, what if he asks for one when my baby is born? If the truth comes out, he will leave me. Donna will throw me out. I will lose everything. Just give me some time. Do not tell him. I will find a way to tell him myself. I sat perfectly still. I looked at the desperate woman sitting across from me. We were 2 lonely women sitting at a wooden table. Both of us had been used by Troy Ballard. Both of us were pregnant. One was carrying his real child, and the other was carrying a stranger. The pattern was perfectly clear. Autumn was doing to Troy exactly what Troy had done to me. She was lying. She was replacing the truth with a convenient story to save her own image. Troy had chosen someone exactly like himself. "You want what from me?" I asked slowly. "I just want you to wait," Autumn pleaded. "You want me to keep your secret," I said. "You want me to protect your lie." Right after Troy forced me to keep his, Autumn did not answer. A single tear rolled down her cheek. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My spine screamed in protest. "I do not owe you anything." 1 week later, Troy launched his counterattack. He had received the DNA results from the court, and he knew he could not contest the science. So he attacked the only thing I had left: my career. I was 9.5 months pregnant. Every step felt like walking through deep water. I was called into the Human Resources office at Memorial Health. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a sick yellow glare. I sat in a hard plastic chair across from the department director. She folded her hands on her desk and looked at me with clinical pity. "Katie," the director said softly, "we received a very disturbing phone call this morning. A man named Troy Ballard contacted the hospital. He claimed you are harassing his family. He said you are using the legal system to extort money from him, and he expressed concern about your mental stability." My face burned. The humiliation was absolute. I had to sit there in my nursing scrubs with my huge belly resting on my lap and defend my sanity to my employer. I had to explain that I was simply following a legal court order for paternity. The director nodded and said it was a personal matter, but a formal note would be placed in my file regarding the disruption. I walked out of that office feeling entirely hollowed out. I went straight to the staff break room. Gina was waiting for me. She did not say a word. She just handed me her phone. The screen showed Donna Ballard's public Facebook page. Donna had posted a new photograph. It was Troy and Autumn standing in the sanctuary of the First Baptist Church. Troy was holding Autumn from behind his hands, resting lovingly on her pregnant belly. The caption read, "God's plan unfolds." My son found his way back. Baby Ballard on the way. There were over 200 likes. The comments were a solid wall of praise. God is so good. We are so happy for Troy. What a beautiful family. I scrolled through the comments. Not a single person asked about the other girl. Not a single person mentioned my name. I was no longer a villain. I simply did not exist. Donna had completely erased me from the narrative. Gina gently took the phone back. She also passed out invitations after the Sunday service, Gina said quietly. They are doing a formal baby dedication for Autumn next Sunday. The whole congregation is invited. I left the hospital. I drove back to my empty apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the blank white refrigerator. Then a sharp, twisting pain ripped through my lower abdomen. I gasped and grabbed the edge of the counter. The first contraction. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands and called Gina. She answered on the first ring. "Gina," I whispered. I sank down to the kitchen floor. The linoleum was cold against my bare legs. "I think I'm going into labor." Another wave of pain hit me, stealing the breath out of my lungs. And Gina, "I think I am giving up." Hours later, I was lying in a hospital bed in the exact same labor and delivery ward where I worked every single day. The women taking my blood pressure and adjusting my monitors were my colleagues. They were the nurses I ate lunch with. Now they were delivering my child. But the room was painfully empty. Gina stood by my side, holding my right hand in a vice grip. There was no husband pacing the floor. There was no mother wiping the sweat from my forehead. I was entirely without a family. The fetal monitor beeped in a steady, relentless rhythm. The sharp chemical smell of betadine filled the air. The bright white surgical lights glared down at me, blinding and hot. The doctor told me to push. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. I pushed with everything I had left in my exhausted body. Through the haze of pure agony, I stared straight up. There was a faint brown water stain on the ceiling tile of delivery room 4. I had stared at that exact same stain 100 times while coaching other terrified women through this process. Today, I was the terrified woman. Lucia came into the world at exactly 2:47 in the morning. She weighed 6 pounds and 8 ounces. She did not hesitate. She let out a loud, furious cry the second she hit the cold air. Her dark eyes were wide open. The doctor placed her directly onto my bare chest. In that single, perfect moment, the entire world vanished. Troy disappeared. Donna faded away. The church, the emails, the legal documents, the Facebook posts, none of it mattered. There was only the warm weight of my daughter. There was only the smell of sweet colostrum and fresh newborn skin. A little while later, the nurses cleared out. Gina squeezed my shoulder, told me she was going to grab some ice chips, and slipped out the door. The clock on the wall read 3:15 in the morning. The room was perfectly still. I was completely alone with Lucia. For the first time in 6 long months, I stopped trying to be strong. I stopped trying to hold the broken pieces of my life together. I looked down at her tiny, perfect face. "You are going to grow up," I whispered into the quiet room. "And one day you are going to ask me where your father is." I could lie to you. I could tell you he went away on a trip. I could tell you he loved you but he could not stay. Or I could tell you the truth. I traced the curve of her soft cheek with my thumb. But telling the truth means you will know your father told me to handle it myself. Telling the truth means you will know your grandmother called me a troubled woman. It means you will know that nobody in either of our families wanted us. Tears spilled over my eyelashes and dropped onto the hospital blanket. But if I stay silent, I am letting them write your story. Remaining silent means Lucia Soto grows up living in the version of reality that Donna Ballard created, a version where your mother does not even exist. The shift happened deep inside my chest. It was like a heavy iron lock finally snapping open. I realized I no longer cared if the Ballard family accepted me. I no longer cared about proving my innocence to 47 women in a prayer group. I did not need their validation to know my own worth. I needed my daughter to know her history. I needed her to know her true identity. She deserved the absolute truth, not a sanitized lie. My daughter would know exactly who her mother was, and she would not learn it from someone else's whispered gossip. I reached over to the bedside table and picked up my phone. I opened the photo gallery. I stared at the screenshot Gina had sent me earlier that day. The elegant floral invitation for the church event. Next Sunday morning, the First Baptist Church of Savannah, a blessing for baby Ballard. I looked back down at the sleeping infant on my chest. "You are also baby Ballard," I whispered to her. Exactly 6 weeks later, I stood at the heavy oak doors of the First Baptist Church of Savannah. The morning air was thick with the lingering summer heat, but inside the sanctuary, the air conditioning hummed with a deep, steady chill. I pushed the wooden doors open just an inch. The smell of floor wax, white lilies, and 200 expensive perfumes drifted out into the vestibule. Inside, the pastor was speaking. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceilings, asking the Lord to bless the child that was about to join their congregation. I looked down. My daughter Lucia was sound asleep against my chest. She was strapped into a fabric carrier, her tiny fingers curled tight against my collarbone. I wore a simple white dress. I wanted every single person in that room to see me clearly. Inside my leather purse, I carried a printed laboratory report, a printed screenshot of a deleted Instagram post, and a digital audio file exactly 4 minutes and 22 seconds long. Gina stepped up behind me. She placed a warm hand on my shoulder. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I took a slow, deep breath. The air filled my lungs. Yes. I pushed the heavy doors wide open. The hinges let out a soft groan. I stepped into the center aisle. For the first few seconds, nobody noticed me. The congregation was looking forward, their heads bowed in prayer. Up at the altar stood Troy. He was wearing the charcoal gray suit I had picked out for him 2 years ago. Beside him stood Autumn in a flowing white maternity dress. Her hands rested protectively over her 6-month belly. They looked like a picture-perfect magazine cover. Then a woman in the back row turned her head. She gasped. The sound was small, but in a quiet church it traveled like a gunshot. The man next to her turned, then the row in front of them. The silence spread down the center aisle like a wave. The rustling of Sunday clothes and the shifting of wooden pews rippled through the massive room until it reached the very front. The pastor stopped mid-sentence. His microphone picked up his sudden intake of breath. Troy opened his eyes. He looked down the long, carpeted aisle. All the color instantly drained from his face. He turned ash white. He was not looking at me. He was staring directly at the bundle strapped to my chest. He was staring at the actual living child he had told me to handle myself. The real baby, here, breathing. In his church, while he stood next to a woman carrying a baby he only thought was his. Donna Ballard sat in the very front row. She turned around. Her signature pearl necklace caught the light from the stained glass windows. She immediately stood up. She stepped out of her pew and blocked the aisle. "You are not invited here," Donna said. Her voice was not sweet this time. It was a sharp, frantic hiss meant to carry. I did not stop walking. I kept my pace steady, my orthopedic nursing shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. I stopped exactly 3 feet away from her. I looked past her shoulder directly at Troy. "I know I am not invited, Mrs. Ballard," I said. I did not yell. I used the clear projecting voice I used in a chaotic delivery room. The acoustics of the church carried my words to the very back wall. But my daughter was invited. You invited your entire congregation to come bless baby Ballard this morning. I unzipped my purse. I pulled out the crisp, white laboratory document. I stepped around Donna and placed the paper directly onto the wooden communion table. White paper against white linen. "This is baby Ballard," I said. "Probability of paternity is 99.97%. Ordered by the family court of Chatham County." Troy stepped down from the altar. His hands were curled into tight fists at his sides. He lowered his voice, dropping into that slow, patronizing tone he always used when he wanted to control a narrative. "Katie," Troy warned, "you are making a scene. You came here because you want drama. You want attention. You want to ruin." "A scene," I interrupted. I reached into my purse again. Like the scene where your mother told you to abandon your child, I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. I turned the volume up to the absolute maximum and held it up in the quiet air. Donna's voice echoed through the sanctuary. It was crisp and undeniable. "I told Troy, do not sign anything. Do not acknowledge anything. You want money. You will not get a single penny." I hit stop. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I looked over at the section where the First Baptist Women's Prayer Circle usually sat. 47 women were staring in absolute horror at Donna. Donna did not look at them. She did not have a sweet prayer to offer. She simply stared at me, her lips parted in shock. I pulled the final piece of paper from my bag, the printed screenshot. I held it up so the front rows could see the image of the ultrasound and the caption. "Dad life," I read aloud. Posted 3 days before he looked at me through a phone screen and asked how he knew it was his child. He already knew. He signed the clinic forms. He cried when he heard her heartbeat. And then he left, and his mother sent an email to 47 of you calling me a troubled young woman. Troy took another step toward me. His eyes were wide and frantic. He was losing the room. He was losing his image. "Do not listen to her," Troy stammered. He looked back at Autumn, gesturing wildly. "Look at my fiancé. Look at my family. We are having a baby." Autumn took her hands off her belly. They were shaking violently. She looked at Troy. Then she looked at the 200 people staring at her. Her face crumpled. "Troy," Autumn whispered. Her voice broke, but it was loud enough for the first 5 rows to hear. "This baby is not yours." Troy froze. He blinked slowly as if she had started speaking a foreign language. Autumn wrapped her arms around her own ribs. She was sobbing now. I miscarried very early on. I was so scared you would leave me. I got pregnant again right away, but it was not with you." What Donna gasped. Her hand flew up to clutch her pearls. Troy stared at Autumn. He looked at her round belly. He looked at me. He looked at the tiny infant sleeping against my chest. He looked out at the 200 people who had just witnessed the complete collapse of his reality. He had absolutely no one. The child he had thrown away was his. The child he was throwing a massive church celebration for belonged to a complete stranger. He had been played by a woman using the exact same playbook he had used on me. A liar had found a liar. Donna sank slowly back into the wooden pew. For the first time in 30 years of dominating that church, she had absolutely nothing to say. Her pristine reputation was shattered. The congregation knew she had orchestrated a cruel lie, and they knew she had been foolish enough to be fooled herself. I gently adjusted Lucia in her carrier. She stirred, but she did not wake. "I did not come here to ruin your ceremony," I said into the silence. "I came here because my daughter deserves to have her name in her own story. I have delivered the children of some of the women sitting in this room. I am a labor and delivery nurse. I am not a troubled woman. I am a mother." I turned around. I walked back down the center aisle. Gina fell into step right beside me. We pushed through the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the blazing Savannah sun. The heat radiating off the asphalt parking lot hit me instantly. The smell of blooming magnolia trees was thick in the air. I walked toward my car. Before I could reach the door handle, I heard the heavy slap of dress shoes hitting the pavement behind me. "Katie, wait!" I turned around. Troy was running across the parking lot. His charcoal suit jacket was unbuttoned. His tie was loose. He stopped a few feet away from me. He was breathing hard, and tears were streaming down his face. They were not the manipulative tears he cried in the clinic. These were the panicked, desperate tears of a man who realized he had set his own house on fire and locked himself out. "Katie," he choked out. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I am so sorry. I messed up. I messed everything up. Can I please just look at her? Can I see Lucia?" I looked at him. I did not feel anger. I did not feel pity. I just felt an overwhelming sense of distance. He was a stranger in a nice suit. I did not say yes. I did not say no. "The family court will decide your visitation rights," I said evenly. "Your lawyer can contact my lawyer." I turned to open my car door, then paused and looked back over my shoulder. "She has your eyes, Troy." He looked down at the hot black asphalt and buried his face in his hands. As I opened the back door to unclip Lucia from the carrier, another set of footsteps approached. A woman in a floral Sunday dress hurried over from the church steps. It was Mrs. Patton. She was 55 years old and a senior member of the Women's Prayer Circle. She reached out and gently touched my arm. "Katie," she said, her voice trembling, "I received Donna's email." I believed it. "I am so terribly sorry." "Thank you, Mrs. Patton," I replied. "You delivered my granddaughter last year," she continued, tears pooling in her eyes. "You held my hand when her heart rate dropped. You saved her. I know who you are. I should have known better than to believe a piece of gossip over the woman you are." I nodded slowly. I accepted her apology, but as I buckled Lucia into her car seat, a quiet realization washed over me. I did not need her apology to survive. If I needed 200 people to validate my truth, then I had not really changed at all. Real strength was not getting a crowd to nod in agreement. Real strength was sitting alone in delivery room 4 at 2:47 in the morning and deciding that my truth belonged to me regardless of who believed it. 2 weeks later, the air in Savannah finally began to cool. Late September brought a crisp breeze to Forsyth Park. The large white fountain in the center of the park sprayed water into the air, catching the bright afternoon sunlight. The smell of roasted pecans mixed with the fading scent of the last magnolia blossoms of the season. I pushed the stroller along the paved walking path. Lucia was awake, her dark eyes wide and tracking the shifting shadows of the large oak trees. Gina walked beside me, holding 2 iced coffees. A lot had happened in 14 days. Troy had filed a formal petition for visitation rights through a family law attorney. He was doing it the right way this time. No phone calls, no harassment. I did not fight the petition. I would let the court system do its job and set a supervised schedule. I was not going to give him a free pass, but I was not going to be vindictive either. Donna Ballard had vanished from social media. Her Facebook account was deactivated. She had formally resigned as the president of the women's group, citing sudden health reasons. Nobody in the church believed her, but nobody confronted her either. That was how Southern churches operated. Scandals were whispered over casseroles, never shouted in the sanctuary. Her punishment was her own silence. Autumn had packed her bags and moved back to a trailer park in Statesboro. Troy knew the baby was not his, but he did not pursue any legal action against her. Suing her would mean putting the entire humiliating ordeal into public court records. He simply swallowed his pride and let her go. And yesterday my phone had rung. The caller ID showed a Valdosta area code. It was my mother, Rosa. It was her first call in 6 months. She did not say she was sorry. She did not admit she was wrong. She just breathed heavily into the receiver for a long time before she finally spoke. "I heard about the church," Rosa had said. "Somebody told me." We sat in silence for another long minute. "What is my granddaughter's name?" she asked. "Lucia," I told her. "Lucia Soto." Rosa had stayed quiet for a moment. "That is a beautiful name," she whispered. And then she hung up. It was not an apology, but it was a question. It was the very first brick in a bridge that might take years to rebuild, and for now, that was enough. Gina and I reached the edge of the park. We stopped near the sidewalk bordering Victory Drive. There was a small, quiet Methodist church on the corner. It was a modest brick building with a simple wooden charity donation box standing near the front steps. It was a church where nobody knew my name. I locked the brakes on the stroller. I reached into my diaper bag and pulled out a small black velvet box. Gina paused with her coffee cup halfway to her mouth. "Are you sure about that?" I popped the lid open. The diamond engagement ring caught the sunlight. I had kept it in a drawer for 6 months. I had not worn it, I had not sold it, and I had not returned it. It had just sat there, a heavy anchor to a life that did not exist anymore. "I am sure," I said. "I do not need anyone to propose to me to know I am worthy." I pulled the ring from the velvet cushion. I walked over to the wooden box and dropped it through the narrow metal slot. I heard it clatter softly against the bottom. I did not feel angry. I did not feel a grand sense of triumph. I just felt finished. I walked back to the stroller and unlocked the brakes. Lucia kicked her little legs. She was looking up at the thick canopy of a massive magnolia tree. The broad, dark green leaves rustled in the cool autumn breeze, flashing their copper undersides in the sun. "What do you see?" I whispered to her. She was only 8 weeks old. She could not answer me, but she kept her dark eyes fixed on the sky. I stopped pushing for a moment. I stood beside my daughter and I looked up at the leaves right alongside her. For the first time in 6 months, I was no longer looking down. The leaves of that magnolia tree eventually turned brown and scattered across the grass of Forsyth Park. The seasons changed. The years moved forward. 5 years is a long time. It is enough time to finish a nurse practitioner program, working long shifts and studying while a toddler sleeps in the next room. It is enough time to buy a small 2-bedroom house in Ardsley Park with a bright yellow front door. And it is enough time for a baby to turn into a 5-year-old girl who insists on tying her own shoes. "I can do it," Mama Lucia said. She was sitting on the floor of our hallway wrestling with the pink laces of her sneakers. I leaned against the doorframe and watched her. "Take your time. We have 5 minutes." A heavy knock sounded at the front door. My stomach did not drop. My breath did not catch. I simply reached over, turned the deadbolt, and pulled the door open. Troy stood on the porch. He wore a faded polo shirt. The sharp, confident posture he used to carry was completely gone. The car dealership had quietly let him go 3 years ago, when the local gossip finally began to affect their sales numbers. Donna had stopped attending the First Baptist Church altogether, choosing to watch Sunday services on television in her living room. "Hey, Katie," he said. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Hello, Troy. She is almost ready." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "It is hot out here. Can I step inside for a minute?" 5 years ago, I would have stepped aside. I would have offered him a glass of water. I would have made myself small so he could feel comfortable. "No," I said. My voice was perfectly flat. "You can wait on the porch. I will send her out." Troy closed his mouth. He nodded slowly and took a step back. Lucia grabbed her purple backpack. She ran to the door, hugged my legs, and skipped out onto the porch. Troy took her hand. I watched them walk down the driveway to his car. My jaw was relaxed. My hands rested easily at my sides. I touched the solid wood of the door frame, feeling the smooth paint under my fingers. I closed the door. The house was quiet. I walked into the kitchen and poured a cup of dark coffee. On the wall next to the refrigerator, there was a framed photograph. It was a picture of my mother Rosa, sitting right here on my living room rug, reading a book to Lucia. It had taken 2 years of awkward phone calls and short, tense visits, but she had finally sat on my floor. She had finally learned my daughter's favorite stories. The bridge was not perfect, but it held our weight. Gina had told me once that truth and peace do not belong in the same room. She was right about the beginning. But what grew in the ashes was a peace that nobody could ever take away from me. You do not build a peaceful life by swallowing your own voice to keep the people around you comfortable. You build it by speaking the truth out loud, standing your ground, and then refusing to ever back down from it again. True peace is the boundary you draw around your own life. I took a slow sip of the hot coffee. We all face that one defining moment. The moment where you have to decide if you are going to keep shrinking to fit into a story someone else wrote for you, or if you are going to stand up and write your own. I chose the truth. It cost me the illusion of a perfect family, but it bought me a real one. What about you? Have you ever had a moment where you finally stopped looking down and decided to speak your truth, no matter what it cost? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one.